All right, I've got my clipboard. Should we start and then we can talk about the bus in a bit? Hello and welcome to a Tuesday episode of Electoral Dysfunction. We've a lot to tell you on this episode. Lots of you were emailing, WhatsApping and tweeting to say you fancied some more electoral dysfunction during this campaign, as did I. So throughout June, we are here on Tuesdays and Fridays. Ruth will be here.
Hello.
Ruth, where are you?
I am in sunny Scotland.
She's got a suit jacket on, so she means business today. On Friday, Jess will be choosing people for her subs bench. And on Tuesday, hello, Ayesha Hazarika.
Well, hello, ladies.
Oh, I'm so excited about this. I went to the Sky bosses and I said, I've got a list of people that we want that was going to have the same vibe, that's going to be funny, but also knows what it is and can see behind the curtain and be passionate and would be fun down the pub, which is the vibe we try and go for. And my list ran to one name and it was Ayesha Hazarika. And I'm so glad you said yes.
I have to say, separately, I also had a list and my list was also of one.
Well, honestly, I cannot tell you how absolutely chuffed to bits I am to be here because I love this podcast.
Look, Ayesha, I'm going to come back to you and do a proper introduction in a second, but let's just tell you what's coming up. How much of a dysfunction with the first big Starmer misstep of the election? That's the row about candidate selection, which started with Diane Abbott. And the election TV debates start Tuesday. How do leaders prepare? And how important will that hour of live TV be for Rishi Sunak if he wants to narrow the gap in the polls? But look, please keep WhatsApping us on 07934 200 444. So this podcast now has a second baroness, which basically means that I am surrounded by greatness and poshness. I've got two baronesses. What's the plural?
The collective noun is like a coven.
A coven. So the only way I'm going to get any longevity in this podcast is I am going to have to obviously be ennobled, which, you know, I'm there for it. No,
Exactly.
Really.
Well, listen, Beth, I think it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time.
Also, you're both Scottish, so I'm really outnumbered here, aren't I?
Yeah. Although, to be fair, Ayesha's from the west and I'm from the east. So, I mean, the divide is almost bigger than like London to Glasgow, do you know?
Now, Ayesha's a former Labour advisor. I've known her for many years, haven't I, Ayesha? Because you used to advise Harriet Harman and has done a bit of electioneering herself during her time. So, Ayesha, tell us a bit about what you did for Labour in 2010 and 2015.
Well, so I was working for the Labour Party for a long, long time. I became a special advisor to Harriet Harman back in 2007, and we worked on a lot of women and equality issues. In fact, we talk about it all the time. In fact, it is back in the news now, and I did a lot of media stuff, but my focus is really women and equality issues. And then I went to work for Gordon Brown as well, and then I went to work for Ed Miliband, and I helped him do many things, including preparing for Prime Minister's questions, a lot of his media and comm speech writing, and preparing for those big televised leaders debates.
So you're very, very specific there. What you said, I got, but what I heard was, don't blame me for the Ed Stone.
Well, to be fair, Ruth, I can't be blamed for the Ed Stone because I was too busy with the disastrous pink bus, okay?
Right, okay. Well, we'll talk about the bus. Let's talk about the bus.
Yeah.
Can we just explain this, the pink bus? Because last week, Rayner, I did an interview with her, which you actually should have heard on this pod. We doubled up. We put it on the daily Sky News podcast and I stuck it in the electoral dysfunction feed as well because I'm greedy, basically. Anyway, so Angie was talking about the Labour bus, but back in 2015, Harriet Harman launched the pink bus. And I went on that pink bus and Ed Balls made us cupcakes. And it's one of my enduring memories. But why was I quite like the pink bus. What was wrong with the pink bus, Ayesha?
It was born out of a real sense of frustration with a lot of women in the Labour Party that like women were kind of not really a feature of that 2015 general election campaign. It was just lots of kind of boys and lots of men. And so Harriet, being the deputy leader, she was like, I demand a bus. And then they were like, okay, fine, you can have a bus. And then we were like, okay, we've got a bus. It's a women's bus, right? And so there was another red bus. We were like, can't have a red bus, can't have a blue bus, obviously, can't have a green bus, couldn't even have a purple bus because that was like kind of UKIP-y. And we were like, oh, why don't we have a pink bus? And we were like, oh, that'll be quite fun. And everyone hated the pink bus. And I remember we launched it it was really glamorous. It was like the leisure centre at Stevenage car park. And it really was like a scene out of West Wing. And it was so funny because we had like a female driver driving the bus. We didn't want to have a man. And the poor woman driver like couldn't reverse park. And everyone's like, love, just back up. Do you need a man to come in? It was just like a disaster from start to finish. And then we get out at the launch. I think it was me, Harriet and Gloria De Piero, and all these journalists start firing questions at Gloria De Piero, who's quite uncomfortable about the pink bus, and they're like, Gloria, is this bus pink? And she's like, I think it's more magenta than pink. And people are like, answer the question, is this bus pink? And she's like, I think it's more cerise, like maybe more cerise.
Did you, because this is always fascinates me in election ones, like when someone goes, we'll have an Edstone, or we'll have a pink bus, or we'll send the Prime Minister out in the driving rain to announce election. When you had the idea, Ayesha, and then when you launched the magenta, cerise, pink, we're not quite clear on the colour bus, did you stand there and go, I am in the thick of it, I didn't realise this would happen, and it unfolds before your very eyes? So you can almost have an out-of-body experience of like how comedic it obviously becomes.
Yeah, totally. And I think the thing was, like, when we came up with the idea, and Harriet was very, very, very keen on this idea, and to be fair to her, like, a lot of people did try and like talk her out of it, but she was on something. She's like, I want to do something that's going to make a splash. And the other thing that was really hilarious about it was because we got no support from the party, it wasn't really even a bus, it was like a people carrier, let's be honest.
It was a mini bus.
It was a pink camper van. But you're so right though, Beth, because when you're in those moments, it's going so badly, you almost have to sort of go mentally into the place at your safe space, like the cupboard under the stairs. You're just like, I am now in Armando Iannucci's. In fact, Armando Iannucci could not even begin to imagine the horror of this. But the saving grace for me is because I'm also a stand-up comedian, I just kept notes on everything, and it provided me with an hour of belting stand-up. My first ever stand-up show after I left politics was called Tales from the Pink Bus.
There you go. Every cloud, silver lining.
From a Tory point of view, thank you for the bus, Ayesha.
Well, as ever, we've completely diverged, but I enjoyed it. Let's go back to the last few days. We did it last week. We're going to do a bit more today because the last few days have gone in a direction that Starmer didn't plan. Labour have been having a dysfunction, I think it's fair to say, over candidate selection, particularly the accusation that candidates from minority backgrounds are being overlooked. We now know that Diane Abbott's going to stand again as Labour candidate in Hackney North and Stoke Newington. Starmer eventually said on Friday she was free to stand as a candidate again after reports the ruling body would bar her. So this story all started on Tuesday night. By Wednesday night, I was of the view they're going to have to let Diane Abbott stand, that this is now spiralling into a really negative story for Starmer. They held the line Wednesday, no decision taken. They held the line Thursday, no decision taken. Then on Friday morning, a message came through that Starmer, having said no decision had been taken, was going to make another statement. And I'd already written the tweet saying, Keir Starmer is going to let Diane Abbott stand. It was so obvious before he said it. It was so obvious that they were going to have to U-turn on it. Ayesha, it's not just been about Diane, though, has it? It's morphed into other candidates such as Pfizer, Shaheen in Chingford and others. How much discontent do you think there is around selection at the moment in the party?
So the party is kind of quite shocked about how all of this has blown up. I think where there is a kind of agreement across the party, across all different wings of the party, is that this has been very, very badly handled and it has brought trouble to the door of what was looking like a pretty slick campaign and, a pretty good operation. Where there is division is over the kind of substance of this. I think Diane Abbott is seen in a slightly different light from some of these other candidates. And I have been in contact with people from all different factions of the Labour Party, including people more on the right of the Labour Party who are unhappy with all of this because of the historic role that Diane Abbott has played. Although look, there is some anger about Diane Abbott, but I think on the whole, people are kind of angry with how this has been handled. It shouldn't have been left to the last minute. I think with the other candidates, it's a slightly more mixed picture. So there, I think, are people who are upset with the way that Faiza Shaheen has been treated, and I thought her Newsnight interview was really it was very difficult to watch in terms of how she said she'd been communicated with right at the last minute. I think, though, there's lots of other people, though, who almost wondered why she had been a candidate, because she was not very much going along with the sort of politics of Keir Starmer. And what the party has done, whether you agree with it or not, is be really clear about the kind of candidates that they want to pick. But I think what it has thrown up is that something has gone wrong in the process and handling and the system of all of this. And some people are saying that where's that person in the leader's office that should have had that 360 view, this Diane Abbott thing should have been on a risk register, a political risk register. And the other candidates, not so much, because they're not that well known.
So a couple of things on this. The first thing is that it seemed to me quite quickly on Wednesday, I thought politically they're making a misstep. And the reason I did was that Diane Abbott represents far more than Hackney North and Stoke Newington to a lot of people, yeah? So she's bigger than the seat. Once they had given the whip back to her, to try and then bar her from standing is illogical, and it's going to backfire. When I spoke to some people around this inside Labour, there was a couple of things going on, which is this is not polling in focus groups beyond the Westminster bubble. You lot are all obsessed about it, but out there, people they're not noticing. And I was like, no, if this dominates the headlines, people will notice, and she's a national figure. And then the second thing was, she's like tweets about Corbyn. The point being that people within the top echelons of Labour are saying, for any other candidate, if they behave like that, we probably would deselect them. There is a question, isn't there, which is what's the bloody decision-making process that it takes 2, 3, 4 days to bow to the inevitable? Someone did concede to me over the weekend that they think they should have acted sooner. And is it because there's too many people in the decision-making process? Or is it just, it's a cock-up and they happen?
I think there's a couple of things here. I mean, I think there are competing tasks that have to happen. So we've been bounced into an early election. We all thought it was going to be October, November. We're polling so far ahead. We're going to get lots of people elected that we maybe haven't done vetting on to the point, that we would otherwise do. Let's try and sanitise and let's do a health check on our candidates list to save us paying further down the track. Understand that. That would actually be quite a responsible thing to do. I think you then have to look at process and choreography. If you're going to start deselecting people and being brutal about it, you don't make your first person, Diane Abbott, who's this as you say, this massive figure that's been around since the 80s, first black woman MP. She's held in real affection within the party. Nobody's looking at the whole. Nobody's seeing the wood for the trees and saying, look, so wait a minute. The first thing we're going to do is deselect a black woman, an Asian woman, and a gay man, and we're just going to parachute in straight white spads and wonks that have worked in Keir's office, and that's going to look fine. Of course it doesn't look fine. It looks dreadful.
Ruth, last week when we did this pod, Jess was the first out of the traps, actually, of senior Labour people to publicly say, just let her stand, this is not a fight worth having. I took the view that I thought in the end that they would have to either let her stand or they'd do an elegant kind of peerage or something. And Ruth, you thought they'd stick to their guns.
Well, I kind of thought if you're going to let it, by this point, it had sort of dragged on for, we were into our third day. If you're going to do it like that, then you might as well stick to your guns, because if you've got a big majority, by the time you get to sort of day 2 after you're elected and you start in your 100 first days, people will have forgotten about her.
And Ayesha, I guess that what Ruth was saying about Starmer parachuting in spads and wonks, people that he wants in the party. That how much of a calculation, if you're sitting there advising a perhaps future PM, and he's looking at it thinking, if I get a majority under 30, I'm going to have this big Labour left rump and they're just going to absolutely screw me every which way. Is that part of the calculation? Like he wants but more control over the party. He doesn't want a big rump of rebellious MPs. And also he wants to put people in that he thinks will be competent in government, right?
There's a couple of things to sort of unpack here. If you go right back to, I suppose, Keir Starmer's mission with the Labour Party, he always had a couple of phases. And the first phase was to try and sort out the party when he came in, and it was in an absolute mess and there was all the terrible stain of anti-Semitism. The next step was to professionalise the party, which was to get really good people on the pitch, bringing back people like Rachel Reeves and Yvette Cooper, bringing in people like Wes Streeting. And the third part of it was to go out, pivot to the country, away from the party, and win the next general election, right? So that has always been his kind of flow chart of what his missions are. And taking control of the party has been done kind of quite quietly in the background. I mean, there was a conference about 3 years ago where there was some quite boring, nerdy rule changes, but they were really, really important because they stopped moderate MPs being deselected by kind of hard left activists. But I suppose finishing that fight has now happened now with these elections. So some of that kind of getting control of the party back's been under the radar. This is where it has kind of really been honed into view. And there's two schools of thought right now in the Labour Party. I'm speaking to people all the time about this. There are some people who are like, absolutely, go Keir Starmer, and go somebody called Morgan McSweeney, who's a really important part of the Keir Starmer project.
Can you explain who he is?
So Morgan McSweeney is kind of like Keir Starmer's, if Sue Gray is the kind of chief advisor on future of government and getting Labour in shape for government, Morgan McSweeney is the person who helped Keir Starmer get elected in the first place. He knows the party inside out. He knows every nook and cranny of it. And he is Keir Starmer's chief advisor on all things to do with the party. And he has been the chief architect in terms of wrestling back control from the hard left to Keir Starmer's power. And he is a really, really important person. So I think he's been a really big kind of driving force with these elections. And I think he and Keir Starmer will be having a very ruthless eye saying, right, we don't want people who A, are going to cause trouble if we get elected, but B, we want people who are going to be competent and be good and kind of, are in our mould. So that is one view of looking at it. There is, though, on the other hand, quite a few murmurs of discontent just saying, hang on a minute, even under Tony Blair, our most successful Labour leader ever, John McDonnell was in the Labour Party. Diane Abbott was in the Labour Party. There was this rump of socialists in the party. And actually, to deal with these people, you have to be really, really good and you have to win. That's how you defeat them. You don't just defeat them by completely killing them. But the other side will come back and say, hang on a minute, we tried that with Jeremy Corbyn. We let these people in and they absolutely took root of the party, and we can't let that happen again.
On Morgan McSweeney and some of his, they call them the boys in the Lotto, which is the leader of the opposition's office. There is discontent in the party. One figure in the party was saying to me the other day, why can't they just be gracious in victory? And what this person meant was they've pretty much got rid and killed off the left in the party. Why are they going for Diane Abbott? Like, they do not need to do this. And it just actually looks spiteful and it looks nasty. And Ayesha, one thing, was it just a misstep, or was it also they were bounced by it? Because Angie Rayner, I wasn't necessarily expecting her to do that. There was a line that the shadow cabinet were taking, which was Starmer's line. She did a round of interviews on Thursday morning, clearly said to me, Diane should be allowed to stand. That, I understand, was unideal, to quote one person.
In the run-up to Angela making that very big and game-changing intervention, the number of women, particularly women from across the party and across factions within the party, the WhatsApps were popping off. Everybody was having the same conversation behind the scenes. Candidates, of course, don't want to be disloyal, so they're not going to say anything publicly. Everybody was messaging everybody within the party going, this doesn't feel right. This feels really, really badly wrong for all the reasons that you have gone through. And I think that a lot of women in the party were going to Angela, and she's probably thinking to herself, right, I'm the elected deputy leader of this party. I'm a feminist. All these women are coming to me. I've got to say something about this. This is actually, I've got a duty on me.
Which I get, but you also do that behind closed doors and say, look, I'm telling you, Keir, I'm having all of these women within the party. Like, this is one where you've got to think again. And I think, in terms of the rocky relationship that she's had with Keir before, if not her and Keir as people, their offices and the trust or distrust between them, I think that's quite instructive. And I think if the Tory party could in any way get its shit together, she should start to focus on that.
They did try to focus on it, didn't they? Because then the attack lines the next day became Angela Rayner's leading the party, Keir Starmer is weak.
But nobody noticed because nobody was listening. Like, it didn't cut through. I don't think
is
that
it just me that listens to it all? Yeah, that's my job.
Be, yeah.
That's it. But look, going back to Angela Rayner, she kept saying to me, it's not Keir that's being factional. I don't think Keir is factional. I don't think Keir wants to purge the left from the party. So as she was sort of smacking him in the face, metaphorically, it was like a tickle and punch. Is that what you describe it? Is that a thing? A tickle and a punch?
That sounds a bit specialist and niche, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think there's websites you can look up for that.
Involving a mask.
What I mean, there's a phrase for it. It's not a tickle and a punch. Do you know what I mean?
So I think in terms of she's trying to cover her backside by not being overtly disloyal to the leader, while absolutely destroying the decisions that are being made by the leader's office in his name, whether he's the person taking them or not. But I do think, coming back to the fact that this is the first wobble that their campaign has had, and it's been a slick campaign, it was a slick launch. They've been very tight in the way in which they've done things. They've been pretty impressive, actually, with how tight they've kept it. They've come out of this week, which is undoubtedly a wobble they would not have sought or wished to have. If you kind of look at the poll of polls, they've actually increased their lead by sort of 1% to 2%, which is within the margin of error. But if this is your wobble, I mean, I think you'd probably take it.
I mean, I've been speaking to people very close to Keir Starmer, very senior in Keir Starmer's team, and listen, nobody is happy about this. Nobody is pleased about it. And everybody concedes it's been a mess and they want to get it fixed. They want to get this fixed.
Is it right that she was thinking about standing down at the next election and that this has almost made it impossible for her now to do so?
I don't know where she had got to, but I think the way that this has all unfolded, particularly with that incredibly unhelpful story saying that she'd been barred from standing, that was incredibly hurtful for her. And I think that was, whoever's briefed that out, and nobody knows who's briefed that out, there's lots of, suggestions flying around. But she wanted to be able to make her own decision with agency. She's been in Parliament for a long time. She wanted to have it be her decision. Now, I understand she has now said that she does want to stand, and I can understand why she does want to do that, because if you have been tried to be pushed out by people, some faceless people, that's going to make you think, screw you, I am not getting pushed out. I fought damn hard as the first black woman to get into Parliament, and if you think I'm being pushed out like this, F you. You can see why she's thinking that.
Oh, totally. I mean, some of these kids have been in his office for 5 minutes. They've been in the Labour Party for 5 minutes. She's been doing this for 40 years as an elected representative and as a kind of person who is visibly different. And and there's people that have lots of differences across Parliament and they come from lots of different backgrounds, but being visibly different makes you a target.
By the way, Ruth, we
Yes.
have had dozens and dozens of emails and WhatsApps after the last episode. Ruth, do you think that's because people were feeling sad about Jess leaving us for a few weeks?
Oh, I think they're bereft.
Well, we had a few of those, but no. Do you think that we had loads of feedback on our amazing analysis of the Tory PR machine?
No, Not particularly, no.
These are leading questions. Our inbox is actually full of pets named after politicians.
Of course it
A whole
is.
new genre. This started because Jess met a dog named after Ted Heath, and Ruth's dog's very definitely not named after Harold Wilson, and my cat's called Scooby, which I haven't got Scooby's why. Anyway, we've had so many. I need to get my clipboard for this. We've had Maggie the sausage dog, Pretty the hen, a goat named after Gordon Brown, and this is a cockerel called Boris, and I've got it on my phone, so just stand by, everyone.
I love that.
There's
Boris
more.
the cock. I love it. Love it.
I've got more. A Boston Terrier called Winston, a Basset Hound named Gladstone, cats called Neil and Glennis. Oh, this is my favourite. A salamander called Nelson Salamandella. Do you see what they did there?
I like that.
I like it.
I love it. And a guinea pig named Merkel out there. Now, Fred lives on a farm in Gloucestershire and sent us a WhatsApp. In the interest of balance, he's got ducks named Boris, Nadine and Liz, also on his farm. Angela and Rachel, the pigs. And the biggest news is apparently Angela's having piglets and they're planning to call one Jess.
Oh.
I mean, you could call one Beth as well if you'd like. I guess I'm not a politician.
Don't call
You could
them
definitely
Ayesha.
have Ruth. Do you want to see the pigs, though?
Okay.
Oh.
Oh.
They're actually really nice, aren't they?
Are they like spotted Gloucesters or something with a cute name? Because they've got like a little black ear falling over their eyes.
Who knew that the politicians named after pets would become a movement?
Or pets named after politicians. But we could name politicians
I
after
say?
pets. The other way around.
Did I say
It's
politicians?
been a long
after-
campaign, Beth.
Now, we've put a few of your pictures on the Sky News Instagram, so please go and look at all the pets. I mean, if you want to keep sending them in, I'm happy to take them. My Instagram feed is actually full of cat videos, because obviously I watched a few, and now I have cat videos and rescue dog videos. And I actually find it very nourishing after a hard day of politics. Right, let's pause there. We're back in a minute. Now, the TV election debates start on Tuesday night with Julie Etchenham on ITV. Now, everyone here can offer a different perspective. I've hosted one. Ruth has been a participant in one, and Ayesha has prepped leaders for them. So how do you get on top of a live TV debate, Ruth?
Well, I've done hundreds, because in Scotland you've no shyness in terms of just having cheap telly, and leaders' debates is very cheap television for the broadcasters to make. Just get you all in a room, let you fight. But yeah, you've got to know the format. And you've got to decide what it is that you're going to do. Do you try and do something that will play well in the room, and the broadcasters work hard to make sure it's a mixed audience, so you will have at least a proportion of people that already support you there? Or do you speak over their heads, and do you make sure that you go down the camera lens and you're speaking to as many people at home as you can?
What did you do on that? Because the whole thing about 2010 was Clegg looked down the lens and spoke to the viewer at home. How do you handle that, Ruth?
Yeah, so the particular part of the cycle that we were in, we were trying to expand, especially when I was doing the 2015 general election and the 2016 Scottish election. And there was this big clash between people that were pro-UK and pro-independence. And there was all of these pro-UK votes that were kind of up for grabs with nowhere really to go particularly. So I was very much in the broad church, speak to as many people as possible, land the lines that you don't have to be a Tory to vote Tory at this election, you just have to care about X or Y or Z. I actually don't think that's what Rishi's going to do here. I think that they're going for a far greater core vote strategy, and as we talked about in a previous podcast, to try and peel lost votes back from Remain, because that's an easier job than it is to try and take votes that have already migrated to Labour or the Lib Dems. So he's going to have a different way of doing it to me. But the other thing that you've got to prep for is structure. Is it a town hall debate? Are you going to be cross-examined by other political leaders? Or is it just, audience members? Or is it just the journalist? Because the way you speak to people in an audience is different to the way you speak to a moderator, and is different again to the way you speak to an opponent. So you've got to prep for all of that. And you've got to have people that are good on what are your weak points. And, as we've talked about my army background in the past, I'm a full believer of train hard, fight easy. So I would get like a bunch of people in the room that would kick the utter crap out of me, that would ask me unfair questions, that would ask me questions that were personal, that was stuff that wasn't even public, that people wouldn't even know, that would absolutely rip me to shreds. And we would do a process where they ripped me down and built me back up. And you've got to be brave enough to do that, and you've got to give the time to it. And it's hard when you're running a campaign and you're on the go every day, but you have to give yourself the time to really prep the shit out of it.
Ayesha, you did it with Ed Miliband in 2015. Where do you start with it on these debates?
Well, you have to put in so much time. Ruth is absolutely correct. The amount of prep is phenomenal. If you're taking this stuff seriously, you start doing your prep months and months and months before. We used to call them debate camps because we would go away for the weekend. We'd have our teams and we would go away to various places across the country. People would lend us nice big country houses and we'd go and camp there for weekends. It's quite a big team. We actually had loads of Americans fly in as well. We had David Axelrod and a team of, high-level Democrat strategists in DC. And David Axelrod had prepped Clinton, he'd prepped Obama. And the one thing I would say is, I think sometimes we in British politics always look to Americans for these TV debates because they do them more regularly. We are actually quite new. 2010 was the first time we really had these. But our debates are quite different from American debates. And I think sometimes you can actually make a mistake just trying to make it too American. Like we had this one guy prepping us who kept saying to Ed, "Happy warrior, like your face should be happy warrior." And we were like, what the fuck does this mean?
That got written down. He had it written on a card and they saw it over his shoulder and he had the absolute piss ripped out of him for that.
Yeah. He also stumbled off the stage.
Oh, I remember
That's all I remember from it.
Well, I was in the room next to him watching it with loads of Labour people. And we had said to him in the rehearsal, there was a lip at the edge of the stage, be very, very careful. And he was like, "I'm not an idiot, I'm not gonna trip over it." Cut to tripping over the lip. And then we walked.
Do that impression again?
Honestly, I'm not going to trip over it, honestly. I'm actually doing a very good Ed Miliband impression.
You do?
Spent too much time with the man. Anyway, there was a slight delay when we were watching it in this room. So we watched him trip. He came into the room and we would just watched it and we were like, "Oh!" And then he walked in and we all went, "Yeah!" kind of thing. And he was like, honestly, how bad was it? What was it? And everyone was like, it was fine. And then Rachel Reeves said the funniest thing. Rachel went, "Do you know when Madonna fell off the stage at the Brits? It was a bit like that, Ed. It'll be a real talking point." And everybody was like, "Don't say that. Don't say that." But what I think is also interesting about these debates is that because the main one that people will really sort of think about is the head-to-head with Sunak and Starmer. And because they have had a lot of time doing PMQs, their teams have quite got the measure of the other ones. They will have been studying them. And I just think what's going to be interesting with this is how risky will they want to be. So you can see a situation where Rishi Sunak, because he is feeling like the underdog at the moment, he does want to be a bit more in the moment. But if you're Keir Starmer, you're going to want to play it quite safe.
It's really interesting, isn't it, Ayesha? Because, we were talking about it through the years from 2010 to the first debates to 2024 now. What we now have is two head-to-heads with just two leaders. So there's been different manifestations of these. And now both the potential two guys that really are the only ones with a shot of being a PM, they are not going to allow themselves to go on stage with other leaders. I mean, if you look back to 2010, when Brown agreed to do it with Clegg and Cameron didn't anticipate, did he, that Clegg would be the guy that everyone go, "Oh, Nick Clegg was good." And what's interesting, and this is when you are really far behind, you want more and more debates because you just want opportunities to try and destabilize, undermine, get one over on your opponent. And it's been very interesting, the negotiations for this, because Starmer's team have said all along, we will do 2 head-to-heads. Rishi Sunak's team have been trying to get them to do 6. They just will not. And I guess for Sunak, and you're talking about the risks, the thing is that all Starmer has to do is draw. He doesn't have to win. I guess the question is there more pressure on Sunak because he has to try and make this big televised moment a game changer? Or is it really awful for Starmer because he's got his Ming Vase and this DV debate is a polished floor upon which he worries about slipping? Who's it harder for? Is it just a nightmare for everyone involved?
Well, I think it's a bit like PMQs. It is a nightmare for everybody involved. I mean, this stuff is really, really difficult. I think for Starmer, his team have made strategically the right decision, because why should he put himself up there with every other party leader when everybody will gang up on him, right? That's when you're going to have your kind of uncontrolled moment. So if you're his team, that's where the Ming Vase strategy really comes into play. You're going to take a total safety first. Rishi Sunak has got 2 jobs to do, and he has a hard time. He's got to try and really land a blow on Starmer. And given that he hasn't really done that at PMQs, that is quite a high bar for him. His second job, he's got to appear to those older Tory voters who are flirting with reform, and he's got to send them a message, come back home to the Conservative Party. So he's got 2 messages. He's not trying to win this election at this point. That's the only 2 things he's trying to do. His strategy is, I've got to take this from being a loss of 200 to maybe a loss of sort of 100 to 150. Keir Starmer's one job that he's got to do is he has got to come out and he's got to look like a prime minister. You're not going to trip over the stage or anything like that. You are going to look like somebody who could feasibly, I could see at Downing Street. That's his only job.
There's also a thing, Beth, where you practice all the lines, you practice all the questions, but the more important thing is not actually the individual words that you say in the order in which you say them, it's what you convey. So it's your presence, it's how you speak, it's who you appeal to, it's the kind of wood for the trees thing. So there's also a question about who's got the biggest target as well. So in a head-to-head, I mean, Rishi Sunak has got to defend a much bigger target because he's one of a series of 5 Tory prime ministers who all believe different things and have done different things. And he's got to defend all of them, and he could be asked about any of it. The target for Keir Starmer is much smaller to aim at and to hit because, basically, what is it that you're going to do? Well, I'm going to do better than you because you've been rubbish, blah, blah, blah. So it's much, much easier.
I mean, the way that Starmer's team put it to me over the weekend, because we were chatting, I was asking them about how they're approaching the debate, was that Starmer's going to be, to quote someone, the chief prosecutor. So he's going to prosecute 14-year record of Rishi Sunak, who he's going to kind of place in the dock, defending it. What do we think of that as an idea? Do we want lawyer Starmer up there?
Well, I think lawyer Starmer is who Keir Starmer is. People are often like, who is this guy? Well, he was an absolute legal hotshot. He was the sort of top prosecutor of the country. And actually, some of his most effective prime minister's questions, which is a very good kind of prepping ground for these leaders' debates, have been when he has been very, he's prosecuted a line of argument. He's been very forensic. Remember, for many people in the election who are not geeks like us, they might tune into 5 minutes of one of these debates. He's got to send them a message at home, a positive message about why they should positively vote for him. What is he going to do to fix Britain? That is the other really important message that he's got to transmit in these debates. It's not just punch Rishi Sunak around, because that's quite an easy job right now. That is not a difficult thing to do, to be absolutely fair. You could be weak as a kitten and kind of bash Rishi Sunak around right now. He has got to send a very positive, strong, reassuring, hopeful message to the viewers at home.
I think the problem is that I'm not entirely sure that the public thinks that competency or strength really is Keir Starmer's issue. I think there is an issue about appeal. I think there's an issue about likability. And actually the words like ruthless and prosecutorial or chief prosecutor, they're not really likable. They're not warm. What he wants to show is, to do the hopey changey thing. He wants to show that a better way is possible. That's what his job should be as he goes into this.
And I think given that lots of people are really cynical about politics right now, and they don't kind of believe that anybody can really fix the mess that this country's in, he's also got to send a message to people that he can give them something to believe in, because a lot of people really feel absolutely kind of hopeless at the moment about the country, and they don't think anybody can fix it. So I think these debates, I think they are important. I know everyone like moans and says, oh, they're not really that important. And do they move the polls that much? Probably not. Everybody thinks it's going to be like a Nick Clegg moment. That happened once. We're probably not going to have a moment like that. But what they do is they punctuate this election campaign, because for a lot of people, they give the election campaign some structure.
Yes. And Ruth, just to finish off on this, I've been, feeding in from some of the Conservatives out there that are campaigning now. I was checking out with one person. I said, how it's going in your seat. They said it's going okay, but my sense, this is a senior Conservative, my sense is the polls are right. It looks like a very bad result indeed nationally. And this person said that they didn't have any confidence in the national campaign, and this is all about, to quote them, squeezing reform voters now. That was one of your colleagues, Ruth. How important is it for Rishi to close the polls?
I think we want to see a bit of movement for the reason that it will put more pressure on Starmer, and you get to see how he performs under pressure, because he's not really been put under the same scrutiny and pressure that the government has. And that's kind of fair enough, because there hasn't been, up until this week, any really big missteps, because he's not the Prime Minister, for lots of reasons. But there is a resignation about a lot of colleagues.
Well, look, I should say as well that we are not having a head-to-head at Sky News, but we are planning our own leaders event in Grimsby and Cleethorpes, where we've been regularly reporting on issues facing local residents. Now, Sir Keir has agreed to attend while negotiations are going on with Mr Sunak's team. And can we also have, finally, a shout out to Julie Etchingham, who would have spent her entire weekend with two people pretending to be Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak, with a load of stooges in the audience pretending to be people questioning. She'll be timing their answers. She'll be working on the interventions. She's an absolute legend. The true winner of this debate, I predict, will be Julie Etchingham. Can we all agree on that?
Absolutely, 100%.
100%. We're with you, Julie.
Oh, 100%.
Well, ladies, that was an absolute pleasure. We're going to be back on Friday with the first of Jess's subs. I have to say, she's got a superb black book, that lady.
Shameless. That woman hobnobs with both political royalty and entertainment royalty. And basically just anybody who's famous that's come out of Birmingham ever.
What's everyone doing for the rest of the week? Ayesha, what are you doing?
Well, I've ended up being in Greece actually this week, because I'm speaking at a big conference.
That makes me feel a bit wistful. Although I'm going to Greece in the summer, subject to politics. Always have an asterisk whenever I say I'm doing anything subject to job. Ruth, what are you doing for the rest of the week? You'll see me on Friday again.
Equally, like Ayesha, I've got a very exotic excursion planned, in that I'm going to Dumfriesshire, Clydesdale and Tweeddale. So yeah, that's where I'm off to this week. Lucky me.
Well, I don't know what I'm doing this week. It's subject to election. Ruth and I are going to be back on Friday for our first subs bench edition. We'll see who Jess has lined up from that delicious black book of hers. Email us at electoraldysfunction@sky.uk. WhatsApp me on the burner phone 07934 200 444. Ayesha, it was great to have you for our inaugural electoral dysfunction extra. All right then, bye everyone. We'll see you next week.
Bye.